Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be discussing what happened a couple months ago with the shielding, healing, and tanking update. Hi. So, we're going to start with covering the core champions, what happened to them. Then we'll go on to the event champions, and we'll cover up some other stuff. But first off, the core. So, primarily tanks and healers and one shielder were affected during this update. First off being Celeste. So not a lot happened to her. We still see that her specialization stayed the same, but it made her healing more relevant, and that's a theme going throughout the entire update. But generally, you still want to go for damage unless you really needed that little extra bit of healing. But I'm going to explain why that's not needed with the next, or with in two champions. But generally, I'll recommend going with the extra damage. Apart from that, nothing really else changed. Her achievement changed a little, but you don't need to worry about that. Next up, we have Nayeli. Nayeli saw a bit of a change where now we have, you see like, whoa, that's only 70 health. They squished a lot of the numbers, so your damage numbers are going to stay the same, but the health of all the champions is different. You want to know how much different? Nayeli has a little bit under 1,000 HP, whereas before, like at that level, it was like thousands and thousands already, and we were going into like the ridiculous amounts. So they kind of normalized damage, and they actually made damage the same for every adventure set. So 1 through 50, enemies do the same amount of damage. 51 through 100, same amount of damage. 101, etc. Right? So they made it easier to balance in the future, because it will get to a certain point where, because the damage of the enemies is fixed, but so is the HP, because over-leveling is gone. Wow, I was really leaning over here, wasn't I? Sorry. Because the HP of our champions is so low, except for tanks, and even then that's fixed, we would eventually reach a point where it doesn't matter how much damage we're doing. Well, okay, whatever. But our tanks would just die in one hit anyway, or in very little hits. So fortunately, we haven't really come across that limiter just yet, because at this stage in the game, you either have the damage or you don't, and then you just kind of wipe anyway. It's pretty normal. But Nayeli she kind of got a small nerf in terms of use, but only because an event champion, which we'll cover in a little bit, got such a huge buff. So my recommendation is, this one's kind of tough, actually. I've seen some people go extra health just because they put Nayeli up front, and having her be a lot tankier is better than just having double damage. Because generally, when you're on a wave, doubling your damage isn't going to matter much, because it's just astronomically high. Whereas maybe if you get the ultimate timers going, that might matter a bit more. That brings up another good point. The ultimates were made relevant. That's something neat to know. And generally, you have your soft cap of damage. So like you'll level up all the way to like E49 or so. And then from there, you obviously can do no more damage, right? Because there's no more upgrades. Over leveling still does a little bit more, but it's not at all worth it. But hey, you have free gold, why not, right? But don't expect like crazy gains. The real change here is now ultimates feed off of a more correctly displayed DPS timer. Now there are instances where this has been buggy, so experiences may vary, but over a couple runs you should get a general sense of where you can reach putting your familiars on the ultimate bar, which is good. So that's Nayeli. The next champion that was changed, well, really not much change, but the reason she's so much better, Calliope, is because her shielding is ridiculous now. And that brings me to my point of why I said Celeste's healing is kind of irrelevant, because Calliope provides so much shielding that the healing never happens from Celeste. And by the time the like enemy power up ramps to a point where the shields are gone, Celeste isn't going to hold them out much at all, or much longer, because it's like, all right, hit, oh, you're almost dead, heal, dead anyway, right? So there might be some edge cases where the healing will matter, but in general, you should assume that Calliope is just a god and use her a bunch. Plus, her buffing is still very, very respectable. In fact, you know, I'll show you a chart at the end, because it'll show where everyone is, and along with some newer champions, because I've been really late at getting this video out. Technical difficulties and scheduling is a problem. Anyway, so from Calliope, we have Tyril. So, big change. Tyril is back on top. His numbers were increased, and his specialization was kind of changed. He still has his Moonbeam Wild Shape, but the Wild Shape also provides its own kind of buff to good aligned champions. And this is only a little bit lower than Moonbeam. So if you really need a tank, Tyril is amazing because he's one of the best tanks in terms of HP and taking or not taking damage. So he's up there, but you got to make that decision on whether or not he's worth it. I will say that eventually, at a crazy gear level, we'll talk about Arkhan in a little bit more, but Arkhan can make better use of Wild Shape, but more on that in just a little bit. Another reason why Tyril is so much better now is because Berwyn got a huge nerf. But we'll cover her in the event section. But just know that Tyril is super good again. Really good. So, Arkhan, the guy who we never used before. Now, he's amazing. And actually, let me click the progress button, because I think I need money. So, yeah, shoot. All right. I didn't think that one through. But anyway, you don't really need to see it necessarily. But Arkhan's specializations are totally different now. He got a complete rework, and he's amazing. He's generally going to be a lot of people's best buffer, by and large. So what are these specializations? Well, one, which is less used, we'll cover, is the bulk up, which says that as long as Arkhan is in the front, any positionally reliant buffs that he gets are increased by a factor based on his shield, which we got a golden epic recently. So bulk up and usurp, right? For me, at this level, I'm able to just say, okay, for every buff that Arkhan can bulk up or usurp, it's a plus 1E1 increase. So to explain, like if a buff gives me generally 1E5 and Arkhan can use it in either one of his specializations, it's actually a 1E6. So it's a 10 times multiplier. And when you repeat that over how many positional buffs we have, he gets ridiculously good. But bulk up is not the best, because sometimes you really can't use him up in the front, especially with how formations go. This particular formation could be kind of used, we see, but generally usurp is going to be your best bet, because any buff that he can bulk up, or he can also have usurped if you're clever with positioning. So what does usurp do? Usurp says if Arkhan is not benefiting from a positional buff, but an adjacent ally is, he will take that buff, or he will copy it over and make it better. Again, following the increase. So let's, gosh, I wish I could show you. Wait a minute. I can't. Is it pausing? Shit, it's not pausing. Pausing. Okay, so while we're waiting, there are some other things that we can talk about for Arkhan, which are good. So, he has two new features. Actually, every tank has this new feature where every tank will increase the health of all champions in the party by 25%. So when you have a lot of tanks that can do a lot of buffing, they don't have to be actively tanking. They just have to be there, and they increase each other's health, which is very useful and kind of provides a unique balancing opportunity with like, ooh, I can be a better or a slightly better buffed party, but can I survive the damage? You only really have to ask yourself that question if the buff is small. If it's large, it's like, yeah, go ahead, do it. I'll just make more gold way up there. That being, apart from that, a less utilized function of Arkhan, because he's generally not tanking up front, is Rage of the Dragonborn. So whenever 6 enemies are attacking Arkhan, his base attack gains a small cleave and does 5 times damage. I'm just reading this off to you. But when 16 plus enemies are attacking, he gets his old ult back, which is just the massive flame breath, right? And it does 25 times damage. That's really, really cool because it just hits everyone. It's a great AoE. So if you can get him to tank up front, super. And this, along with this, counts so each stack also counts with a boss. So if a boss is enraged timer or enraged stack is at 25, he'll do fire breath, which increases his damage as well. Another interesting function in this game is the overwhelmed thing. So each tank can hold about 15, or maybe it's 20 or something. They can hold an amount, a much higher amount of enemies than a non-tank can, especially since like Arkhan's health is 766, but Celeste's is 200 something, right? Or Palton with a 233, and it's being increased because we have tanks like Arkhan. So can I do it? Literally the next time. Okay, next upgrade. So this, whenever more and more enemies stack onto a champion, if they aren't a tank, they will take a lot of damage sooner. So I think the threshold for like non-tanks is like 5. So it'll be like, okay, normal damage, and then 5 something hits, and then it's like, oh god, they just get overwhelmed. Tanks have a higher threshold. It's a really cool mechanic that makes us use tanks instead of just like, oh yeah, Ashara has a really high base health, just use her. So we finally unlocked it. Hey, look at the specialization stuff. So we have bulk up. If Arkhan is in the front column of the formation, then you get X amount of increased buffs that Arkhan is already receiving. They have to be positional. Tyril's doesn't count in moonbeam form. Oh, Usurped takes everything nearby. So let's use that because this is the one that requires the most creative amounts of thinking. So this formation has been well thought out a lot. So this, you know what, I'll probably do it in this video and Arkhan's own video. So here we have a bunch of stuff going on. Let's take it step by step. Arkhan is benefiting. He is usurping Evelyn's buff, or Evelyn's, Celeste's, Palton's, Deacon's, Calliope, Birdsong, and not Grama or Tyril or Warden. Warden doesn't give a buff, he gives debuffs. So how? Why? But you know what? Let's look at these buffs real quick. So, well, these are so low, but anyway, so like Celeste is giving a current bonus of 4,000, which is 4 E3, but now Arkhan has 45,000 or 4 something E4. You know what, let's get some more buffs going just so I can show you. She doesn't count, you do, you do. You have to go evil for reasons, and yeah, we're fine. Okay, so now we have a bunch of stuff. So, these are also low, but anyway, you see that there's this parentheses of current bonus. So instead of 2,000, it's 20,000, right? You just add a 0. That's because Arkhan's shield is so high for me, and it's a golden epic. But anyone can hit that level because you just have to open up silver chests. So he's a very, very good person to use a bunch. So how did I get about getting all these benefits? Well, Celeste buffs everyone adjacent right? You know what, let's turn off auto progress for a second. So Celeste is buffing Gromma, Warden, and Evelyn, not Arkhan, but Arkhan is adjacent to one of them. So he says, oh, I'll take that. He does. Evelyn buffs everyone behind her. So when Arkhan and her are in the same spot, he's not benefiting, but this row behind him is. He takes it again. Calliope buffs the row immediately, or the column in front of her. Obviously, Arkhan is not there. He takes that as well. Birdsong is interesting because she buffs people who are up to 2 spots away. So you have to make sure that Arkhan is 3 spots away, and so you can pull it, and you have to specialize Birdsong for evil because that increases Arkhan's gain from it because he's an evil character. That was a little interesting. I'm pretty sure you don't need an evil character, like you don't have to use Warden, but Birdsong has to be spec'd like that. And then who else? Paulton. Paulton will buff all non-adjacent champions a lot like Makos. So again, you have to Makos, you have to make sure that Arkhan is adjacent to Paulton and that Arkhan is adjacent to a champion that Paulton is not adjacent to. Ugh. In short, right here, Arkhan next to Paulton. Paulton not next to Eve. Arkhan next to Eve. Arkhan gets it because Eve got it, but it went back to Arkhan. Again, that's how it's so cool, and like you can make stuff like there's a lot of synergy that goes on there. It's really it was an awesome idea, and I love that these new elements are there. Each champion that's been affected by the tanking and healing update, or sh&T, shielding, healing, and tanking update, is going to get their own video because some people are referencing my old videos, and obviously those aren't good anymore. But this is a large over-encompassing of like, hey, here's what happened here. So we've covered the core champions. Now let's go and cover what happened to the event champions. You'll see that I'm using Gromma. Why? Well, Gromma got buffed so much. First off, her grandmotherly love does a whole bunch more of buffing, basically putting her in line with Nayeli, but also, it's close to Nayeli, closer. But then you have her other half, which is her specialization route. Circle of the Mountain is technically better because what that does is every time someone attacks Gromma, they get a stack of something. Well, we'll just say Stone Skin or whatever, or Spiky Shell. That's what it is, Spike Shell. So that stacks up to 25 times, and it says you're going to take X amount more damage. That's cool. Whether or not an enemy lives to get up to 25 times is blah, 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 blah. Anyway. Circle of the Arctic does about 90% of that buff in one hit. So you're just like, okay, you're gonna get so instead of waiting for 20 hits instead of 25, you just boop, you hit them once, and Gromma's Arctic thing is kind of in like a small AoE, so it affects a lot of people. She just hits them, and then boom, they are slowed. Their attack their attack speed is slowed as well, and they're going to take a lot more damage. I prefer Arctic because it is all the benefits, and you don't need her to be tanking, so she's a bit more flexible in where you can put her. A lot of people use Circle of the Mountain. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to adjust, putting her in the front and then having some other people elsewhere. Swamp, no one except for like Pakota has really messed with the swamp, but if you want to use her as DPS, go right ahead. Who cares? There will be a video in the future about just enjoying the game, right? But more on all that later. So right now, Gromma Mama is a beast. She's one of the best buffers. I'll show you a chart at the end. Next up, the nerfed Barrowin. Barrowin's hammers really tanked. They no longer multiplicatively stack after each other or exponentially or whatever. They became normalized and controllable. So with that change, this also affected the one real champion who heavily and solely relied on her to be relevant. My personal favorite, Benwyn. Benwyn, he's a bronze bottom, right? Yeah, Benwyn. Yeah, I was like, let's see his name here, but it's, yeah, Benwyn bronze bottom, blah, blah. Really was affected by this change because he needed all of those hammers, in fact, about 4 stacking hammers, to make his DPS competitive with the ever-present, or the formerly ever-present Berwyn Strix combo. When Berwyn lost the multiplicativity of her hammer stacking, Benwyn suffered because he could no longer compete with the DPS that Strix was outputting or other DPS champions. And not only that, but you lose a valuable tank slot. You don't get to benefit from the awesome Nayeli or Grama. So he was already hurt by one aspect, the slot spot, but then now the hammers basically put a nail in the coffin. They are looking to adjust this in the future. I think they might play around with who goes where. Or also Ben will just get his own kind of tanky buff something. That's up to them. They said they're looking into it because right now he is a do not use. Even me, I love Benwyn. I have dumped a lot of money and effort and resources into Benwyn. I love using him. I love his mechanics. And I love dwarves. But I can't recommend him right now. So because Berwyn got nerfed, he died. Evelyn, she used to have kind of like a weak health situation, but good buffing. She's, again, you're just going to use her. She's a little bit tankier because of all the extra health from other tanks. And some of her gear and stuff, actually some of every champion's gear was modified. Like her slot 1 became an all champ an all champ increase instead of a self damage increase, because who cared about what damage she was doing? No one. Let's see. Finally, we have Dinar. Dinar Blitzen was one of the final champions released before the big update, so his numbers were only modified very slightly. He is good, but we'll do a video on him and I'll explain further about what is going on. So that's all the champion changes. What else? Potions of heroism have been brought back, so now you can increase your health if you need to. Generally, again, kind of following the same trend of where should I use Celeste or Calliope? If you tripling your health isn't really going to do much when you can't do much more damage. So very edge niche case. It's useful. It's just not always useful. But I'm also kind of leaning against potions these days since their benefits are minor. Let's see. That seems to be it. So that was the shielding, tanking, or shielding, healing, and tanking update video. I hope this was informative. As always, I'm scrolling through the little that chat thing. Oh yeah, of course. I said I would do something. So here's the chart. Here's the chart. So we see up here, Grama's my number 2 buffer, and only eking out Deacon by a smidge. And Cthulhu used to be slightly better than Deacon. Actually, Grama used to be the best, but Deacon got a golden epic, so now he's on top. Anyway, that's just like politics or like itemization politics. But we see Grama's giving a almost E11 buff with Arctic, real good. Whereas Nayeli, she's giving an E8. So it feels huge. It's kind of small. It's also it's a big change. But Nayeli is still a good tank until you get Grama or until you can't use Grama. So don't neglect your champions. Tyril's way up there. Tyril and Berwyn super close, 2E10 and 1E10. This is assuming that Berwyn can get 3 hammers onto your champion. Probably not going to happen because she needs to be in the front line and taking damage for her speed to get increased. But she's not really tanky. It's a weird situation. Berwyn's going to get tuned up a little bit, I believe, is the most recent thing that I've heard. But Berwyn's ult does give 6 hammers, so it's good for one big swing. But the way walling mechanics work right now, that's really not worth it because it's like, oh, great, you killed something. One thing. Look at everyone else. Probably not the best. So There might be some weird synergy with her and doing ults, but whatever. No one's tried it, and I'm not trying it because I'm now a passive player. I'll kind of sneak that in at the end. So yeah, here is the giant big button. This is Ridge's his spreadsheet. If you go to the Discord and you go to the resources tab where yours truly manages stuff, you can search for Ridge and you can see his spreadsheet. He updates it. He is super smart, and he always adds new stuff. Like let's see, there's a chests thing, or maybe it's a data. Yeah, so you can see how much. This is kind of like a shameless plug at the end for him. You can see your odds of finding an epic chest. Like mine has historically been about 16%. Cool, great. If you like data, Ridge is definitely the person to follow or to keep an eye out for. And you know what? I'll probably do a video on this tool on its own, but this has gone on long enough. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.